Now, without further ado, let me invite the speaker for today, Dr. Wong Keong, who is a former obstetrician and gynecologist at Pantai Hospital, and he is currently the Director of Workplace at the River. Why don't we welcome him even as he speaks on coming up tops Healthwise. Let's welcome him.
Hi, good evening. Thank you, Joel, for introducing the first installment of Workplace at the River COVID-19 Survival Series. Tonight, I'm going to speak on coming out tops Healthwise. To start off with, what is the gist of the medical problem that we are in the midst of today? What makes COVID-19 different from the rest of the influenza? Initially, when it started off, it was thought to have low morbidity, meaning that very few people are expected to die, yet high infectivity. But what has happened is eventually we begin to find, because of the large number of cases, the health resources are just not enough to cope with it. But how can it cause a pandemic of such a global scale? It is different from other influenza because the illness lingers on more than the usual 2-3 days that people suffer from. And as a result of this lingering on, the illness goes deep into the lung tissues, causing the patient to have breathing difficulties and hence requiring ventilation support. This problem was grossly underestimated. So as the numbers increases, the resources that are required to cope with this large number weren't enough in many countries. On top of that, those who are in authority, including the politicians, were unwilling to commit funds to the medical resources. They was deemed to have a lower priority than other budgetary allocations. And they were also reluctant to shut down the economic structures to prevent the spread because of the fear of major financial losses. You all would probably know about the history, pathophysiology, the statistics much better than I do after having read so much of it in the news. But where is Malaysia standing in the midst of all this? Let me put it to you, there is actually good crisis management. Despite the poor public health education that's been going on all this while, there has been a very good management by the early lockdown, and you could see now that even there is a flattening of the infective curve. However, there is resistance due to strong cultural and political interference in the efforts of the health authorities in trying to curb the spread. There is also good health provision infrastructurally that's already in place. As we can always say in Malaysia, no illness goes untreated. Our health system is known to be one of the best in the world, that even WHO has sent even teams to study our health system. The only problem is that we have kampungs that are far deep into the interior that the health system may not be able to reach. Then we also have relatively obedient citizens. Look at the lockdown and during the quarantine. You could see that most people stayed in, and it was also effectively managed by our uniformed forces. This is the only way to mitigate the crisis until the cure or the eradication of the C-19 is achieved through vaccination. Take for example, smallpox. It was only eradicated through vaccination and not just through isolation or quarantine. But where are we currently? If you look at the graph that is actually put on, you could see the expected curve, which is in red, it goes up exponentially, but the blue line, which represents the actual mitigation measures, has been shown to be effective. You could see the jagged line below the red line there that indicates that we are at a steady 150 to 170, sometimes hitting 200 cases currently. It shows, because of this linear progression, there is a flattening of the infective curve. So we are actually in a good place. But take note, we are not over yet. Take Hong Kong or even China or Singapore, for example. Although with strict restriction during the MCO in these countries, when they relax it, the number of cases that came back from overseas, plus small little clusters here and there, gave it another spike in the number of new cases. So therefore, like Singapore just a few days ago had another major clampdown. So we still got to wait and see to look at the number of new cases that are coming up to make sure that they do not continue to rise. Even as they continue to maintain at the number of new cases, it doesn't mean that we have reached the plateau or reached the peak. It just means that we are flattening the curve, that's all. It's only when there are 0 new cases we have reached a plateau, and that's when we can begin to expect a relaxing of the movement control order. Well, we can only hope and pray that it will come soon. But still, something good comes out of it. I have heard so many good reports that when families spend time together, when friends who are sharing rooms or houses stay together, there is a time of reflection, a time of bonding, and also a time of recalibration of our priorities. We begin to realize there are many things in life that we work towards that are cluttering our life and may not necessarily be there. There is also heading towards a restoration of our identity, our purpose in life. So we can see that good can come out of it. Sometimes when I look at it, I'm reminded of these words from the song, You Raise Me Up. It says, I am strong when I am on your shoulders. You raise me up to more than I can be. Who is the you here? It means your friends, your colleagues, the people who are around you, who supports you. They are the ones that will journey with you and can raise you up to more than you can be. But how can you be triumphant health-wise? In the short term and in the long term. Let's look at it first of all from the short term. In the short term, we are subject to the lockdown, which is now coming into the 3rd week. Well, we would expect some sort of a partial lifting by next week, hopefully. Well, there's going to be an announcement this coming Friday, and we hope that there will be a partial lifting, but we've got to be careful. The partial lifting doesn't mean that the worst is over. It just means that we can relax the movement restriction a little bit so that people can go back to work. But I believe and I suspect strongly that the Director General of Health is going to say that we are going to continue to stop meeting in big groups. But let him make the decision on that. Let's look at what we can do on our own. In terms of physical health, there are more reasons than not to be in better health now, because when you stay at home, there's no work stress. You get to eat home-cooked food every day, and in fact, you get a better diet, and you get to spend time with your loved ones, both the young and the old together in one household. There is interaction between the generations. But what we need to look out for is infection. Currently, when we stay at home and we are not in a frontliners group, we are at low to medium risk. You got to be careful that you're not infected. When you go shopping, when you engage in the essential services like going to the bank, or when you take delivery of provisions or food, you just ought to take precautions, the usual precautions when you come to contact, when you go out, or when you take delivery. Do not be taken in by the fake news that sometimes they say, like in the postal services, people will spit or sneeze onto the envelopes. These are basically untrue. Yeah, just take the usual precautions. And I know there are more than enough instructions out there to tell you, so I won't dwell on that. But what if a family member or someone who's staying in your household is infected? Well, you need to take the precautions of quarantining and testing to make sure that the person is actually infected and not suspected only to be infected. And when that happens, if the illness is mild, the person can still be quarantined in your house, and only if severe must be brought to the hospital. What if a neighbor or someone in your community is infected? Well, you can be assured that the health authorities will do contact tracing and they will quarantine the person. There's no need for you to stay indoors all the time, and you can still go about your routine things that even when during this time of lockdown, if you need to go out to buy food, you can still continue to do that. What if you are in a high-risk group? Well, if you're in a high-risk group, of course, if you're in the frontliners, you obviously know what to do already. You've got to take the usual precautions and make sure that you do not catch the infection, and then you put your family members at risk. Other than watching out for an infection, you need to be careful to exercise. Keep yourself well. You don't have to go out your house to exercise. You can watch an exercise video, or you can go around in your compound, do some warm-up exercises, or even walk around in the house compound. I know of a friend who did a 25 kilometers run in the compound of his very own house. Well, that is still possible. Then you need to take care of your immune system. Your immune system is important because that is the one that's going to help you fight the illness if you do get it. So what better way than to protect yourself than to prepare your immune system? You can take some herbal soups, you can take vitamin C, you can take up to 2 grams of vitamin C a day, and this will help you protect yourself by boosting your immune system. Take plenty of fruit juices or even fluids daily, and that also will help you in your immune system. Besides physical health, you need to take care of your mental health. What do we mean by taking care of your mental health? One of the first things that will affect you is the fear of dying, the fear of being infected, and what happens then. And there is also other things that come in like boredom, isolation, and being placed in close proximity to people that you normally would spend time away. For example, even between spouses or even parents and children, you find that you are cooped up in a house 24 hours, and that certainly causes some changes in the relationship dynamics. There are also those who are having existing mental dysfunctions. What happens to them? They may be cut off from the supply of medication, and as a result of that, their illness may flare up again. So these are some of the issues that we need to tackle, and each one needs to be addressed individually. So if you have questions later, please feel free to ask and pose a question as to how do we tackle each of these issues. I just like at this point to insert a video and just to show you what some people do. This video came from China, just to tackle the boredom and to keep the spirits up when they were under lockdown. Hi again. I hope you enjoyed the video. I did, and I had a good laugh at it. Well, besides mental and physical health, there is also another aspect called spiritual health. Within all of us, there is this vacuum that wants to be filled as to the spiritual things in life. Even scientists have given it a name called spiritual quotient. It is a very real thing. It speaks of both a vertical and a horizontal relationship. A vertical relationship is between you and a supernatural or an entity that's far greater than you. And a horizontal relationship speaks of what happens after this vertical relationship is built. It will help to enhance your horizontal relationship. So this is a good time to develop on it. There are many articles to take a look up on. There are many areas. And if you have any question too, we'll be happy to help you on that. So from looking at ways to tackle short-term problems, let's look at how we should look at things in the longer term. We would expect the MCO to be lifted in probably 1 or 2 weeks' time. And what happens then in the post-lockdown period? There are, of course, still the mitigation of the spread of the cases that will still go on, and would expect it to carry on for some time. So don't expect all things to go back to normal in just 1-2 weeks. We would expect things or to go back to normal probably in 3 to 6 months when the vaccine is available. So what do we do then? I think the first thing we should look into is still our physical health. We will have to make sure that we are still at low risk for infection. Don't assume that once you get back to work or there's some semblance of normal, there's no more risk of infection. The virus is still out there, but the risk has been reduced to low level. So most people will be allowed to go back to work. But when you get back to work, it's a new norm. You probably will have to wear a mask all the time. You have to take care of your hygiene to make sure you don't touch doorknobs, you don't touch surfaces unnecessarily. And then when you go out to eat, you're going to make very sure that the food handlers and the food providers are clear of this virus too. Then we look at mass gatherings. Do you think that the mass gatherings will be restored immediately after the lockdown is lifted? I doubt it. I think that mass gatherings that involve a lot of people, like weddings, religious meetings, conferences, will still be restricted, at least for some time, when there is no further increase in new cases. Looking at exercise, we already talked about it in the short term where you can exercise in a compounded house. Now, I believe that there will be lifting of restriction to allow you to go out in a nearby park or something, but you're still advised not to gather in groups. So you can exercise on your own or in pairs and do go back to your usual exercise. Then mental health comes into play. Well, previously we were thinking that because of the coping up of people within the houses, that there may be a problem that arises with close proximity. But now there is a replacing of the fear of being in close proximity or the fear of death. It's a different fear now. One fear being replaced by another. Instead of a fear of death or fear of catching the infection, it's the fear of the financial inability to cope, or even the work stress of having to work harder to make ends meet. That's a different fear. How do you address this fear? Well, hopefully in days to come, we would help you to journey with this. Then there is also a restoration of identity. To many, the work has become an identity to the people. So in this time, almost a month where there was a lockdown, people begin to fear the loss of identity. But now they're back to work, there seems to be a restoration of identity. But you ask yourself, is that a good thing? That you are defined by your work? Then there is also restoration of community. There's the work community and also the social community. To many, going back to work and being restored to the work, or even having the social gatherings, small social gatherings or relationship being restored, it's a good thing. True, but sometimes work situation may not be entirely a relief. It can also be a time of stress. Again, the mental health may be stressed there. And there is also a restoration of treatment for those who have been on treatment for mental problems. That certainly is going to work out for good. What about spiritual health? Well, when you get back to work, people tend to get busy again, especially when there's an economic downturn. Again, what will happen is that the distractions will come in and you begin to go back to your busyness. And if you're not busy, you might turn to entertainment, which might be restored, and then there will be temptations to go back to your old self and to go back to the old habits. Now, that is certainly something that is detrimental to your spiritual health. Under spiritual health would also be the importance of community. When the lockdown is lifted, most are able to go back to their community, and this is very important. All of us benefit from having a community around us, be it the family and the extended family at home or in the surrounding neighborhood, or perhaps even a community that is outside the work community or social community, or even a religious community like in a church, in a mosque, in a temple. This community serves to support you as you journey on in this pilgrimage on this earth. To the Christian, a community would be the church or even the home fellowship groups. This is where someone gets support, loving support from the people around them, and they get encouragement to, as the song goes, to be more than you can be. So in closing, What COVID-19 has done has put the fear of dying into many people. Still, this fear of dying can be put to good use. As we go into quarantine, this quarantine becomes a necessary evil to bear that one can reflect, remember, and then we recalibrate, and then to be restored into the purpose that we are meant to be when we are on this earth. And then when we're able to achieve that, we will come out triumphant, better, and stronger. So in the meantime, while we're still in lockdown, hang in there. Use this time to prepare the new you 2.0 and for the new norm too that's going to come after the lockdown. Remember that. Now is still a time for reflection, and then you can go into recalibration where you readjust your priorities, and finally restoration to the original purpose that God meant for you in life. So well, as I end this talk, I want to wish you to stay home, stay safe, stay well, and God bless. Thank you.